So that's something where I look at it, it's like, okay, you've got the new coach. He's supposed to be a different kind of motivator for you. So then what is the issue? Like, why can't you just start these hockey games with that kind of force that you mentioned, which Florida came out with when they lost 4 games in a row?
Yeah, and I think, too, we can kind of pull back to the Detroit game, right? Like, not just Buffalo. I mean, the Buffalo game they won, of course, and they ended up turning it around. But Detroit was a similar situation, reeling team, playing really poorly.
Horrible goalie.
Dylan Larkin calling them out. I mean, Billy Husso hadn't won since December 2023 in the NHL before that. So, that another good example of, like, why not just come out and make your life easier? These are fragile teams that you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come out and have a good 15 minutes, you probably aren't going to have to actually work that hard in the final 20 because they're probably going to already fold up shop. And you just make your life so much easier by having a really good start and just, blowing them out of the water before they even have thoughts of making it a game. And those are 2 teams that at this point of where they're at in the season and how they've played are vulnerable to really just lying down as the game goes along, as their fan bases have noted. So the interesting part of the whole thing is you play Sheldon Keefe's New Jersey Devils, and they come out and they have an excellent start to their game against the Leafs. And so I can't help but watch that and go, okay, well, obviously there's something in the water in the room. And I don't think that their top guys necessarily grasp what's required of having a strong start in a game in most cases, which is generally speaking, it's getting the puck in deep. It's getting your body on somebody else's body. It's, putting some energy into the building or the bench or, your line mate and, just generating some shot volume, some traffic. And it's not necessarily coming out and scoring like 2-3 beautiful goals. Of course, everyone wants that start, but you can't do that on a consistent basis. Like, you can't rely on just scoring to have a hot start. It's got to just be, let's control play. Let's aggressively get after them. Let's, get our legs going in this game. And they don't come out like that, right? Into this like heavy forecheck style kind of play. And, you would think as they mature along that they kind of see that. And, we talked about that Florida game. They come into that game on the losing streak, and you could see it with Matthew Tkachuk on the other side, right? He's going puck in deep. I'm running the first guy that I see touch the puck. And I'm just going to kind of set the tone for our team and get us rolling that way. And they were physical. Aaron Ekblad threw a big hit. Like, you just kind of go down the lineup of their guys, and it's like exactly what they did. It's exactly how they've played in the playoffs the last 2 years. Jersey, not necessarily a physical team, but aggressive on the forecheck. They controlled the play against the Leafs. If you want to kind of look at other good teams, Carolina, same thing. Like, they'll just get pucks in deep, aggressive on the forecheck. They'll work you and then just sort of build momentum off of having offensive zone shifts. Like, they don't look to do that as part of the process of the game. I feel it's like, did they score? Great. If not much else is happening. And they just sort of waddle their way into the game.
Yeah, well, this is especially frustrating given that this is the mandate of the coaching staff. Like, what you just outlined is what they want the team to do. And when people do the, hey, well, this guy doesn't fit the system stuff, first of all, I usually go, I think you're just saying that. I don't think that there's actually things that you're pointing to. I think that that's usually just an easy thing for people to say. But there are 2 things with it, which is like, okay, so guys who are more East-West players are not supposed to benefit as much. And I think that we've seen some of that with the likes of the Max Domis. But also, if you are supposed to be that team, this is actually, I'm reluctant to even talk about this because it's so overdone, the whole, like, does the core 4 thing work for you? But the one thing about them that has always kind of bothered me is what you're talking about there, where you're going, okay, get pucks in deep, have a body on a body. They've never really had a guy that has just consistently done that for them who has been a stud. And you've seen, that's why Matthew Knies feels so important, is because he is someone that does that more frequently. We understand that Matthews is a good defensive player and Marner is a good defensive player and that they don't hit, but they turn guys over in other ways, blah, 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 go on down the line. they don't have the mix-up in terms of style of play within the top 4 guys, where one of them is the physical tone setter. They're all the tone setter through essentially the same thing, which is playmaking and scoring. And so, yeah, Nye's import shouldn't feel that way as like a 23-year-old guy who has not been long established in the league. It's always felt like they've missed the Hyman piece of it, where it's like the one guy who gives that consistent in deep, hit you, dig around the net, play super physical, and make sure that the other guys can kind of follow suit into the game.
Yeah, it's something that they just don't get on a consistent basis. And, as much as we say system, like anyone can put a puck in a corner and go work hard. Like you don't have to run someone and throw a massive hit, but like you got to work hard and win a forecheck or win a battle, like keep the puck in the offensive zone. We're not just necessarily talking about throwing a big hit to start a game, although of course that's nice, but just like dominate play.
Yeah.
Like, get a puck in and dominate play. And the reality is when games start, there's usually a bit of a feeling out process through the neutral zone, right? You don't usually see, especially with the way the Leafs are playing now, they're definitely not going to open things up through the neutral zone where you're trading chances or you're creating anything off the rush. It's usually a pretty packed, tight spot. So you're almost forced, like Craig Berube or not, you're pretty well forced to put a puck in deep and go forecheck and get it, because games are starting in a fairly static manner where teams are just going to load up at center ice, and you're not going to start by getting a 3-on-2 out of nowhere unless there's a bad pinch or something of that, ilk, like of a bad breakdown. So you're basically required at that point to get a puck in deep and go get it. And they're just not doing it consistently at this point. And it's been really exacerbated, I think, over the past few weeks, where really the only game where I think you could kind of look and say that they did that is actually the game against Detroit, where they did, like the first line did have a good first shift, and then there was a penalty almost like right away, and their penalty kill is actually good, and they seem to get momentum off of having a good penalty kill to start the game. And they did string together a decent start, but it's been far too rare. And then Buffalo, they take a penalty right away again, and this time they give up a goal. So yeah, I think it's something they got to sort. It's tough. You don't want to always look and circle everything back to the playoffs, especially December and November. Like we're 31 games in hockey.
It's hard not to, though, with this group. That's the byproduct of what happens when you struggle this many times over and over in the playoffs, right? Like.
And how many games have you sat there and watched, or you kind of go in and it feels like there should be a little extra juice into the playoff game. Mm-hmm. And then they just get a start where they get completely buried in their zone. Mm-hmm. And you're going, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. And I'll say this too. It's the reason why I think, talking this out with you right now, it's kind of especially concerning when they do have those slow starts and they don't play that way, is that they don't really have the other ways to beat you. Like, this is not a fast team that is going to burn you off the rush, right? That like is a big counterattack team. That's not what they do well. Okay, so remove that. They don't have a ton of depth scoring where they can lean down the lineup and get it in other places. And yeah, they're not a great breakout team either. So what do you got to do? You've got to get pucks in deep and then be able to work hard in the zone and create offense for yourself. And that's when they've looked good. That's when again, in the Detroit game, there were a few moments I thought, hey, the top line looks really good. Why? Because they were creating opportunities off of the cycle. And you're like, yeah, that's, people will say it's like the old way that the Leafs have not in past iterations been like what the expectation was, but it kind of has to be the expectation now. And in defense, and I'll bounce back between some of the like positive and negative stuff just so it doesn't end up being like running them for, 30 plus minutes, is that sometimes I do wonder with the slow starts, how much of that is a byproduct of the lack of depth, that these guys are like conserving themselves, knowing like, hey, I got to have something left in the tank for the third period because we're the only two lines that are going to provide any offense tonight. And so I thought it was kind of noticeable that they got energy in that game yesterday from seeing depth scoring, right? That all of a sudden another line goes and then boom, 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 they start to stack momentum in that stretch of play. And it was like a reminder of, hey, This would be pretty useful if you could get a third line that every once in a while can pick you up in a bad hockey game. They end up not getting sympathy for it because they're the creators of that, right? Like the reason why the Leafs don't have depth is because the Stars command the most amount of money. These two things are directly connected. That being said, did you see anything with that third line yesterday that you thought was sustainable versus just being like, hey, this is the Buffalo Sabres on in a team that has blown multiple leads during a 10 game winless streak?
Yeah, I mean, most importantly, it's the Buffalo Sabres.
The Leafs center dilemma: who can strengthen the roster? If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan like me, you know the team's center depth has been a constant concern this season. With Auston Matthews set to return from a mysterious upper body injury next week, the excitement of having our star back is palpable. However, there are still serious issues to address in the center position to keep the team competitive and, of course, fuel our playoff dreams. David Kampf, a key piece in the center rotation, is sidelined with a lower body injury. As if that weren't enough, Kalle Jarnkrok is still recovering from surgery, leaving another gap in the lineup. Max Domi, expected to be a versatile asset, has been placed on injured reserve, further aggravating the situation after missing consecutive practices due to lingering pains. To sum it up, the Leafs are missing 4 functional centers, and the pressure to act is mounting. James Myrtle, a respected Leafs analyst and contributor to The Athletic, highlighted a series of potential trade targets to address this dilemma during his appearance on the J.D. Bunky's podcast. Among the names mentioned, 2 stood out: Nick Jugstad and, for the nostalgic fans, a possible reunion with Ryan O'Reilly. Jugstad seems to be Myrtle's favorite, and for good reason. The player, who signed a 2-year deal with the Utah Hockey Club last offseason, carries a manageable $2.1 million cap hit, which is essential for a team as salary cap-strapped as the Leafs. Additionally, standing at 6 feet 6 inches and weighing 205 pounds, he would bring not only physicality but also consistent offensive contributions. Jugstad is the most viable option for the Leafs right now, Myrtle stated on the podcast. And he's right. Experienced and versatile, Jugstad has played for several teams, including the Florida Panthers, Pittsburgh Penguins, Minnesota Wild, and Edmonton Oilers, and could quickly adapt to the Leafs' dynamic. With an affordable contract and a solid track record, he offers a practical solution without sacrificing too many future assets. However, it's impossible to ignore the possibility of a Ryan O'Reilly return. Yes, we know he chose the Nashville Predators last summer in search of a quieter environment, but the Leafs management still holds him in high regard. The 2019 Stanley Cup-winning captain with the St. Louis Blues is precisely the type of player any contender would love to have on their roster. However, the cost of bringing him back would be steep, both in terms of trade assets and cap space adjustments, as Nashville or a third team would need to retain part of his salary. I don't think the O'Reilly scenario is entirely out of reach, Myrtle said, showing that there's optimism within the organization. However, there are doubts about how much it's worth investing in a 33-year-old player, even with his impeccable credentials. Meanwhile, cheaper internal options like Steven Lorentz, Connor Dewar, Pontus Holmberg, and Fraser Minton have been mentioned. But let's be honest, these names might serve as short-term stopgaps, but they're far from offering the stability and impact the team needs. The pressure is all on GM Brad Treliving. He knows that despite the Leafs' solid performance so far, the center position is crucial to sustaining any championship aspirations. With the trade deadline approaching, Treliving has likely intensified his efforts to finalize a deal. And we, the fans, are eagerly awaiting good news. For now, all we can do is trust that the team can weather this tough phase and hope a solution, whether it's Jugstad, O'Reilly, or another name, arrives before things spiral out of control. After all, as we all know, the Leafs don't have the luxury of wasting another season with a promising but incomplete roster. The time to act is now. The Leafs center dilemma, expanding on the potential solutions. The Toronto Maple Leafs, amidst another promising yet tumultuous season, face one of their most pressing challenges, addressing a depleted center lineup that threatens to derail their momentum. While the return of Auston Matthews is a beacon of hope, the broader picture remains dire, requiring urgent action from the front office. With Kampf, Jarnkrok, and Domi sidelined, the team's depth has been stretched thin. The immediate impact is clear on both ends of the ice. Defensively, the Leafs are struggling to suppress opposing top lines without reliable two-way centers. Offensively, puck distribution and power play setups have been less dynamic, as the makeshift lineups lack the same chemistry. This imbalance underscores the necessity for reinforcements. Nick Jugstad, as highlighted by James Myrtle, presents the most realistic trade option. His affordable contract and towering physical presence align perfectly with the Leafs' needs. Beyond his imposing stature, Jugstad brings versatility. He can play both center and wing, a flexibility that would allow head coach Sheldon Keefe to adjust the lineup dynamically. However, acquiring Jugstad isn't without complications. The Utah Hockey Club, formerly the Arizona Coyotes, is currently rebuilding but may still demand a premium return for their experienced forward. The Leafs will likely need to part with a mid-tier prospect or draft pick to make the deal work. With their prospect pool already thin, Treliving faces a tough decision. Another name that excites fans and analysts alike is Ryan O'Reilly. The former Conn Smythe winner and Stanley Cup champion has a proven track record of elevating teams in high-stakes situations. His leadership during his brief stint with Toronto last season left a lasting impression. Yet, the Predators have little incentive to move him unless the offer is overwhelming. Should the Leafs pursue O'Reilly, it would almost certainly require a multi-asset package. A first-round pick and a promising young player like Nick Robertson might need to be part of the conversation. Additionally, Nashville would have to retain salary, a process that often involves a third-party team to facilitate. The logistics are challenging but not insurmountable. Internal options like Pontus Holmberg and Fraser Minton offer short-term relief but lack the experience needed for a deep playoff run. Holmberg has shown flashes of potential, but his limited NHL exposure raises questions about his readiness for a consistent role. Minton, while promising, is still developing and would be better served continuing his growth in the minors. A wild-card option could be exploring European leagues or waiver claims to unearth an overlooked talent. Teams like the Vegas Golden Knights and Colorado Avalanche have found gems in unconventional ways, and the Leafs scouting department may need to cast a wider net to uncover an affordable, immediate solution. Another factor complicating the Leafs' decisions is the looming salary cap crunch. With Matthews' extension set to kick in soon, Toronto must be mindful of every financial commitment. Adding a high-priced center now could limit flexibility during the off-season, forcing Treliving to juggle short-term needs against long-term sustainability. Trade timing will also play a pivotal role. Acting quickly could stabilize the team and prevent further slip-ups in the standings, but it may come at the cost of negotiating leverage. Alternatively, waiting closer to the deadline could yield better deals as selling teams grow more desperate. The risk, however, is enduring several more weeks of uncertainty. Sheldon Keefe's role in navigating this storm can't be overstated. His ability to extract maximum effort from an injury-riddled lineup will be crucial. Keefe has already experimented with unconventional line combinations, but the lack of true centers limits his tactical options. A new acquisition would provide the stability he needs to implement a more structured game plan. The Leafs' locker room has remained resilient through adversity, with veterans like John Tavares and Morgan Rielly stepping up as vocal leaders. However, even their efforts may not be enough to overcome the absence of key personnel. Reinforcements are not just a luxury, they're a necessity. For fans, the anxiety is palpable. After years of playoff heartbreak, this season feels like another chapter in the saga of unmet expectations. Yet, there's cautious optimism. The team has shown glimpses of brilliance, and the addition of a solid center could be the missing piece that transforms them from contenders to genuine threats. As the trade rumors swirl, one thing is certain: the next few weeks will be critical in shaping the Leafs season. Whether it's Jugstad, O'Reilly, or an unexpected name, the decision made by Brad Treliving and his staff could define not just this campaign, but the team's trajectory for years to come. For now, we wait, hopeful that the Leafs will seize the moment and finally deliver on their immense potential. Will the Leafs make their move? As the speculation intensifies, the Leafs fan base is holding its collective breath, waiting for signs of a breakthrough.